The splash was what gave her away. Marcus Chen had been enjoying the first quiet Saturday morning he'd had in weeks, sipping coffee on his back deck while watching the early autumn leaves drift lazily into his pristine pool. The water was still, warm enough for a swim, though he'd been planning to close it for the season next weekend. His wife Sarah was at her book club, their twin daughters were at soccer practice, and for the first time in months, he had the house completely to himself. Then came the splash. Not the gentle plop of a falling leaf or the quick dip of a bird getting a drink. This was the unmistakable sound of a human body hitting water with the graceless enthusiasm of someone who clearly felt they belonged there. Marcus set down his coffee mug with deliberate care, the ceramic clinking against the glass patio table. He'd been a litigation attorney for 15 years, and he'd learned that the most explosive situations often began with the smallest, most absurd moments. This felt like one of those moments. He walked to the edge of his deck and peered down at his backyard pool. There, doing what could generously be called a backstroke but looked more like a flailing interpretation of synchronized swimming, was his neighbor Karen Whitfield. Her bottle blonde hair was plastered to her head, and she was wearing what appeared to be a designer one-piece swimsuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. "Karen!" Marcus called out, his voice carrying the same measured tone he used in depositions. "What are you doing in my pool?" Karen flipped, upright in the water, treading with surprising efficiency for someone who had just committed what was technically trespassing. She had the audacity to smile and wave as if she'd been invited to a pool party. "Oh, hi, Marcus. Gorgeous morning, isn't it?" She gestured broadly at the sky, sending droplets flying. "I hope you don't mind, but I noticed your pool gate was unlocked when I was walking Precious this morning." Precious was Karen's tiny, perpetually yapping Pomeranian who was nowhere to be seen. "I've been so stressed with the Homeowners Association drama, and you know how therapeutic swimming can be." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The pool gate was unlocked because he'd been carrying pool chemicals through it earlier. It was his property, his pool and his gate to leave unlocked if he chose. "Karen, you can't just let yourself into my backyard and use my pool without permission." "Oh, come on," Karen laughed, the sound echoing off the water. "We're neighbors. Besides, it's not like you were using it. The water was just sitting here going to waste." She began an exaggerated breaststroke toward the shallow end. "You should be thanking me, really. I'm keeping it active, preventing algae buildup." Marcus rubbed his temples. This was peak Karen behavior. In the 3 years since she'd moved into the McMansion next door, she'd appointed herself the unofficial manager of everyone else's business. She'd reported his teenage neighbor for playing music too loud, complained to the city about another neighbor's unsightly vegetable garden, and somehow gotten herself elected as the Homeowners Association treasurer, despite having lived there the shortest amount of time. "Karen, I need you to get out of my pool, now." "Don't be such a stick in the mud, Marcus." She had reached the shallow end and was now lounging against the pool steps as if she were at a resort. In Europe, neighbors share pools all the time. It's called community spirit. We're not in Europe. We're in suburban Ohio, and this is private property. Karen's expression shifted, her practiced suburban smile taking on a sharper edge. "You know, Marcus, I've been meaning to talk to you about your property maintenance anyway. There are some HOA compliance issues we need to discuss. Your fence height in the back corner might be a 1/4 inch over regulation, and don't get me started on those rose bushes encroaching on the property line." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Karen wasn't just being entitled, she was threatening him. This was how she operated. Push boundaries, then use her HOA position as leverage when anyone pushed back. He pulled out his phone. "Karen, you have exactly 60 seconds to get out of my pool before I call the police for trespassing." Karen's laugh was sharp as glass. "Oh, please. The police? Over a neighbor using a pool? Good luck explaining that to Officer Jenkins when he gets here. You know he's married to my cousin Linda, right?" The threat hung in the air between them like chlorine fumes. Marcus realized this wasn't just about an uninvited swim. This was Karen establishing dominance, testing how far she could push before someone pushed back. She'd chosen the wrong neighbor on the wrong day. Marcus smiled for the first time that morning, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. 60 seconds. Karen, starting now. 59 seconds later, Marcus was dialing 911. He hadn't expected Karen to actually get out. That would have required her to acknowledge she was wrong, something he'd never witnessed in 3 years of unwilling neighborly acquaintance. True to form, she'd spent the entire minute floating on her back like an entitled starfish, occasionally checking her waterproof watch and smirking at him. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a trespasser on my property, Marcus said. Clearly, his attorney training kicking in, he kept his voice level and factual. A neighbor has entered my backyard without permission and is refusing to leave my swimming pool despite multiple requests. Karen's smirk faltered slightly. She'd probably expected him to back down, to cave to her implied threats about HOA violations and family connections in the police department. But Marcus had spent 15 years dealing with bullies in expensive suits. A bully in a designer swimsuit wasn't going to intimidate him. Officers are on their way, sir. Can you remain on the line? Yes. Marcus sat down in his patio chair, maintaining eye contact with Karen. The trespasser is still on the property. For the first time that morning, Karen looked uncertain. She swam to the pool's edge and hoisted herself out, water streaming from her suit onto his pristine limestone pool deck. You're seriously calling the cops on a neighbor over this? You're seriously trespassing on someone's property? Over this? Marcus echoed back. Karen wrapped herself in what appeared to be his pool towel, another small violation that made his eye twitch. This is ridiculous, Marcus. We live next door to each other. We should be friends, not enemies. Friends ask permission before using each other's pools. Friends don't call the police over misunderstandings. The word misunderstanding hung between them like a red flag. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated test of boundaries, and Karen was already trying to reframe the narrative. Within minutes, Marcus heard the familiar sound of car doors slamming in his driveway. 2 officers appeared at his back gate, a younger woman he didn't recognize, and, to his dismay, Officer Jenkins, a burly man in his 40s who was indeed related to Karen somehow. Marcus's stomach sank slightly, but he reminded himself that he had the law on his side. Morning, folks, Officer Jenkins called out, his tone already suggesting this was a waste of everyone's time. We got a call about a trespassing situation? Yes, Marcus stood up. This is my property. Ms. Whitfield entered my backyard without permission and has been using my pool. When I asked her to leave, she refused. Karen immediately launched into her performance. Oh, Randy, Officer Jenkins, thank goodness you're here. This is all just a silly misunderstanding between neighbors. She gestured helplessly, the picture of innocent confusion. I was just enjoying a quick swim on this beautiful morning. The gate was open, and I thought Marcus wouldn't mind. We're practically family here in the neighborhood. The younger officer, whose nameplate read Martinez, was taking notes and looking back and forth between them with professional skepticism. Sir, is your pool area clearly marked as private property? It's in my backyard behind a fence, Marcus Stahl replied. The gate being unlocked doesn't make it public property. Officer Jenkins scratched his chin, clearly uncomfortable. Now, Marcus, you sure you want to press charges over something like this? Seems like neighbors ought to be able to work these things out without involving law enforcement. Before Marcus could respond, Karen stepped forward. Exactly. Randy, you know how important community relations are, especially with all the HOA responsibilities I have. Speaking of which, Marcus, I really do need to discuss those property violations with you soon. Your fence height, the landscaping encroachment. She was doing it again, right in front of the police, using her HOA position as a threat. But this time, Officer Martinez caught it. Ma'am, are you suggesting that HOA issues are related to this trespassing complaint? Martinez asked sharply. Karen's eyes widened with fake innocence. Oh no, of course not. I'm just mentioning that as neighbors we have ongoing community matters to discuss. I would never use my position inappropriately. The lie was so smooth and practiced that Marcus realized she'd done this before. How many other neighbors had she intimidated into silence with threats of HOA violations? That's when Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. Marcus watched his wife of 18 years get out of her hybrid SUV, take in the scene of police officers, a wet neighbor in a towel, and her husband standing by their pool, and he could practically see her mental gears shifting into crisis management mode. Sarah worked in public relations. She could smell a potential neighborhood scandal from 3B. The phone calls started that evening. Marcus had barely finished uploading the police report to his computer when his landline rang. He almost didn't answer it. Who called landlines anymore except telemarketers and his mother? But something made him pick up. Marcus, this is Janet from 2 streets over. Janet Morrison was a retired teacher who'd lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else. Her voice sounded strained. I heard about what happened today with Karen in your pool. News travels fast, Marcus said, settling into his home office chair. Faster than you'd think. Karen's been calling people all evening, telling her version of the story. Janet paused. But that's not why I'm calling. I wanted to tell you something. Last month, Karen reported my grandson for loitering when he was waiting for his ride after visiting me. He's 15, Marcus. He was sitting on my front porch. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. What happened? She filed an official complaint with the HOA about suspicious individuals in the neighborhood. Made it sound like he was casing houses to rob. I had to provide documentation proving he was my grandson and write a letter explaining why he was on my property. Janet's voice cracked slightly. My own grandson, Marcus, on my own porch. After Janet hung up, Marcus sat staring at his computer screen. This wasn't about a pool. This was about a pattern. His phone rang again. Then again. By 10 o'clock, he'd heard from 6 neighbors, each with their own Karen horror story. Mrs. Patterson had been fined for her garden gnomes being aesthetically inappropriate. The Johnsons were cited for their teenage son's car being parked incorrectly in their own driveway. The elderly Mr. Kozlov had received a violation notice for his American flag being hung at the wrong angle. Each story followed the same script. Karen would find some minor violation, often inventing problems where none existed, then use her HOA position to make their lives miserable until they complied with her demands. Sarah walked into his office with 2 cups of tea, setting one beside his keyboard. How many calls now? 8. Marcus rubbed his eyes. Sarah, she's been terrorizing the entire neighborhood. How did we not know about this? Because people were scared, Sarah said simply. You're the only one with the legal knowledge to fight back. Everyone else just paid the fines and kept quiet. Marcus pulled up the HOA bylaws on his computer. As an attorney, he should have read them more carefully when they'd bought the house. But like most people, he'd skimmed through and assumed everything was standard. Now he was reading with the focused intensity he usually reserved for contract negotiations. Look at this, he said, pointing to section 4.3. Board members are supposed to recuse themselves from any complaint involving their direct neighbors. Karen has filed violations against almost everyone on our block. Sarah leaned over his shoulder. Can you prove that? I'm going to try. Marcus opened a new spreadsheet. I'm documenting everything. Every call tonight, every violation notice these people mentioned, every fine Karen has levied since she took office. He worked until nearly midnight, creating a comprehensive database of Karen's reign of terror. The pattern was clear and systematic. She targeted anyone who didn't immediately defer to her authority, using increasingly petty violations to establish dominance. The next morning, Marcus called the HOA management company. Patricia Williams, the property manager, sounded harried when she answered. Mr. Chen, yes, I remember your name from the complaint files. What can I do for you? I'd like to request copies of all violation notices and fines issued in our subdivision over the past 18 months. There was a pause. That's a lot of paperwork. May I ask why? Marcus chose his words carefully. I'm documenting what appears to be a pattern of selective enforcement and potential abuse of authority by a board member. Another pause. Longer this time. Mr. Chen, can you hold for just a moment? When Patricia came back on the line, her voice was different, more cautious, more professional. Sir, I'm going to be completely honest with you. We've been concerned about some of the complaints coming from your subdivision. The volume is unusual, and some of the violations seem creative. Creative? Flag angle violations, garden, gnome aesthetics, driveway parking positions for residents parking on their own property. Patricia sighed. In 20 years of property management, I've never seen anything like it. But Mrs. Whitfield is very persistent in her interpretations of the bylaws. Marcus felt a surge of vindication. Would you be willing to provide documentation of these concerns? Officially, I need to protect my company's relationship with the HOA board. Unofficially, if someone were to request public records that were legally required to provide. She let the sentence hang. Within an hour, Marcus had filed formal requests for all HOA records. While he waited for the paperwork, he decided to take a different approach. He grabbed his laptop and headed to his backyard. His pool area was visible from several neighboring houses, and he'd noticed that more than one neighbor had security cameras. If Karen had been trespassing before, and her familiarity with his pool setup suggested she had, there might be evidence. He started with Dave Martinez next door. Dave was a tech contractor who'd installed an elaborate security system after a package theft last Christmas. Marcus, hey, I heard about yesterday. Dave looked uncomfortable. Listen, man, I didn't want to get involved, but since you're asking... Dave pulled up his security app on his phone. Your pool is visible from my backyard camera. I've got footage going back 3 months. He scrolled through several dates. Here, Tuesday morning 2 weeks ago. The video was crystal clear. Karen, in a different swimsuit, entering Marcus's backyard through the unlocked gate, swimming for nearly an hour, then leaving with what appeared to be one of his pool towels. There's more, Dave said quietly. She's been doing this for months, always when you guys aren't home. And Marcus, she's not the only one. What do you mean? Dave showed him another video from a month earlier. Karen was in Marcus's backyard, but this time she wasn't alone. A man Marcus didn't recognize was with her, and they were both using his pool. I think she's been telling people she has permission, Dave said, maybe even charging them for pool access. Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. Not only had Karen been trespassing repeatedly, she might have been running an unauthorized pool rental business on his property. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Tom Bradley from Maple Street. Got your number from Janet Morrison. We need to talk about Karen. All of us. Tonight, 7 p.m., my house. Bring documentation. By evening, Marcus found himself in Tom Bradley's living room with 11 other neighbors, everyone clutching folders of papers, violation, notices, and printed emails. The atmosphere felt like a support group for HOA abuse survivors. She fined me $300 because my mailbox was visually cluttered, said Mrs. Chen, no relation, an elderly widow. I had a small American flag sticker on it for Memorial Day. She tried to have my daughter's car towed from our own driveway, added Jim Patterson. Said it was abandoned because it hadn't moved in 4 days. My daughter was recovering from surgery. Tom Bradley, a retired firefighter, with the bearing of someone used to taking charge in crises, stood up. Here's what I know. Karen has filed 47 violation notices since taking office 18 months ago. The previous treasurer filed 12 violations in 5 years. He held up a thick folder. I've been documenting everything since she went after my wife for our porch furniture being the wrong style. Turns out, when you fight back with lawyers and documentation, Karen backs down fast. But most people can't afford to fight. What are you suggesting? Asked Janet Morrison. I'm suggesting we call an emergency HOA meeting and demand Karen's removal from the board, Tom said. Marcus has legal experience, and between all of us, we have enough documentation to prove systematic harassment and abuse of power. Marcus looked around the room at his neighbors, people he'd lived near for years but barely knew, now united by their shared experience of Karen's tyranny. If we do this, we need to be prepared for her to escalate, She's already threatening me with more violation notices. Let her try, said Dave Martinez. I've got months of security footage of her trespassing on your property. Hard to claim moral authority when you're committing crimes. Mrs. Chen raised her hand tentatively. What if she retaliates against those of us who can't fight back? Tom's expression hardened. That's exactly why we're doing this. No one should have to live in fear of their neighbor abusing their power. As the meeting broke up, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since law school. The satisfaction of building an airtight case. Karen had made one crucial mistake in her campaign of neighborhood intimidation. She'd messed with someone who knew how to fight back and who'd discovered she wasn't fighting alone. Marcus's phone buzzed with another text, this one from a number he recognized as Karen's. Hope you enjoyed your little neighborhood meeting tonight. Check your mailbox tomorrow morning. Some violations have come to my attention that require immediate attention. He showed the text to Sarah, who was waiting in their car. She's watching us, Sarah said quietly. Good, Marcus replied, taking a screenshot of the threat. Let her watch. She's about to learn what happens when you corner someone who knows a